and welcome to GATSBY Fridays, a show about getting the best out of a creative life from two creative directors working around the world and based in New York City.
I'm your host, Alex Tremilio.
And I'm Sarah Semi.
Today we'll be talking about design education.
We'll talk about our unique educational backgrounds, traditional and alternative paths for a creative career, and how to grow and evolve constantly.
And at the end of each episode, we'll make a signature cocktail to toast cheers to you.
So hang with us as we talk about how to keep on learning. I'm your host, Sarah.
And I'm Alex.
And this is GATSBY Fridays. Alex, before we get into our conversation, let's do a check-in. How are you and what are you wearing?
I am great.
Ooh.
Low humidity today.
Long sleeve t-shirt.
Long sleeve t-shirt. It's a cooler day in the city weather-wise, so it just feels better, which makes my mood feel better. Much better. I am wearing a long sleeve gray t-shirt and white cutoff denim shorts and tie-dye socks and my Vans. I like my outfit today.
And you're wearing this...
And I'm wearing one of my my necklaces that I've made during quarantine, one of my quarantine projects. It's a braided paracord necklace in hot pink and blue.
And some leather trim there. That looks really nice.
With some leather and metal. Yeah, I like it.
Nice.
Thank you. Sarah, how are you? And what are you wearing?
I'm okay. I am a little overwhelmed with work this week, which happens. But I am wearing summer denim and a loose tank top that I haven't worn in a while, and I think I'm done with it. It's got a little like summer abstract print.
Why are you done with it?
No more joy.
No more joy.
I'm wearing it now because it's not, highlighting any of my quarantine curves. But, I don't like just going through the wardrobe and throwing things out. I just want to, I wear it one last time and see how I feel in it and how I walk around in it. And I'm like, I think this has paid its time. I can let this one go.
Okay.
So, something comfortable, white sneakers always when I come down here. Because I'm carrying the dog and the whole studio equipment, laptop, the cloth, the mic, the iPad, everything, the charger, and my purse. Normally I considered a long necklace, and I was like, I can't.
I can't carry any more stuff.
I have my hair up. I don't need with the mask. I don't need earrings. So I've been doing this what's the point? I still want to be comfortable. I don't want to look bad, but I also am you know what? Be simple. Let's try this tank top out one more time. It's it's had its good days. I think I'm done with it, and had a good last day.
What's your cutoff when it comes to clothing and its life cycle in your closet?
Oh, I have things I still have some t-shirts that are 12 years old. It's the whole stupid joy concept. It's true. You can tease it all you want, but it's true. If it makes me happy wearing it, I'll keep it. I have tank tops that are, I have this one Forever 21 tank top with a painting. It's a heather gray tank top with the painting of a parrot on it, full body size parrot. I just love that tank top. It's a tank top. It's never gonna go out of style. It's not something I would wear out, but I wear it at home. I wear it when I do yoga. I wear it when I work out. It's you can. What's the point of it? I love that parrot painting. I don't know why.
I'll
it's
take
it.
That.
It's as simple as that. It's not oh my god, I had this when I had a first kiss or anything. It's just this I just love the parrot.
I'll take it a step further, and I will keep something that I don't even wear, just to keep it for the sentimental value of the thing. And I have T-shirts that are completely disintegrating, but I will never get rid of.
I moved too much in life to hold on to that level. And I'm a sentimental, but there were these high school graduation T-shirts.
Oh, yes. Everyone signed it?
No, all our names were printed, and there's only 100 made, and you could only get it if you graduated from that class, right? Kind of thing. So, I had mine. I had the year before's. They made it from Istanbul to New Orleans, from New Orleans to New York to Pasadena. And then moving back from Pasadena, I was like, I am done. I am not moving across the country with these t-shirts that I haven't worn in so long. It's just like the sentimental value is no longer worth it. So I just piles of t-shirts I donated.
Okay.
I also don't wear t-shirts anymore the same way. But there's that connection to it. And then I moved from my Elizabeth Street apartment after 5 years, and I had to unload a whole lot of stuff. I had to donate a lot of stuff. I learned when you move frequently. After that, I moved in a year. I moved in another year. So I moved 3 times in 3 years. So you unload a lot of stuff.
You do, or stuff gets lost. I remember moving from the East Village to Uptown, New York, and I had packed dishes in my t-shirts, but I lost the box of those dishes. So I lost my helmet t-shirt and I lost my Rage Against the Machine t-shirt. Oh, till this day, I still think I'm going to find it. But yes, of course, when I find it on eBay, it's $200 for that Rage Against the Machine t-shirt.
So yes, we are hoarders, but I've learned over time. So this top, not staying.
Not staying. Good, that's good.
Not staying. Alex, you and I both have unique and non-traditional design education experiences that have defined our careers. Let's start with yours. When did you start your creative education? What were your first art and design learning experiences were like?
When I was I think it starts early on, actually, in high school.
Yeah.
I went to public school in New York City. I think we kind of touched upon this briefly in early episodes. But the education that I got in terms of art was not the greatest. Not in New York City and not in the public school system. So my mother and my aunt enrolled me into classes at SVA for pre-college courses for high school students, as well as FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology. And at SVA, School of Visual Arts, I learned figure drawing and just general drawing techniques, which completely helped. Totally helped in learning how to use my hand, how to gain a technique, how to use different materials.
Did you need to apply to get into those classes, or were you just enrolled?
Those I enrolled.
Okay.
Those I enrolled. There was obviously there's a portfolio process when you get into college that I had to go through as well.
Yeah. Do you have to understand the public education system better, because I didn't go to high school here. I don't know that well. Did you have no art classes at all? Because of, I understand the budgetary restrictions, but I don't know to what extent did you have a once a week, this art study hall where you just got basic assignments and you were too talented for it, it wasn't engaging enough, or they had nothing?
So in the New York City school system, I can only speak for the time that I went to school.
Of course.
Not what's going on now. There were art courses, but these were very basic art courses where you learned shading and different shapes, but nothing in depth, especially nothing in depth in learning about artists.
Oh, yeah, I didn't have that either.
And that is what I learned at SVA. We were getting trained from art professors who were themselves artists, painters, sculptors, and had that background. And they imparted that wisdom to us, where we were learning.
How old were you?
In my teens, high school. So anywhere between 13 to 16, 17. And that's where, I started learning about artists as varied from Picasso to Keith Haring.
Yeah.
And when I started learning about artists that were from New York, that did graffiti, that's when my eyes started lighting up and I started just drawing everything I could possibly think of and enjoying it in the style, actually, of Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat.
That's fun.
Yeah. What about you?
That's the difference between growing up in New York. It's such a different experience. Well, I went to high school in Turkey, and before that, I was born into a creative family. My grandmother on my dad's side was always working with crafts. Not necessarily highbrow art or creative in the sense that, she was not a visionary artist, but she did not sit still. She made a lot of different things. There was glass mosaics, there was she got into these like black ceramic vases that are painted black, and then there would be like fabric floral prints where she would put clay behind them to make them three-dimensional and stuck them on the vases. She loved that stuff.
So like a basque relief?
I'm not sure what it would be called in English. Just like, so it would make like, it would be like a relief, almost like three-dimensional feel for the flower on the print that came from the fabric, because fabric is stretchy. Like stuff like that, but like, they looked craftsy. They didn't look polished. Like even then I was just like, she also had these like all over her apartment, and I was like, eh. But when I was a kid, like I got to sit there, like she would, teach classes at the Japanese Women's Association, like, and do crafts with them. So like I don't have that many fond memories about that relationship, but I remember the crafts. And my grandfather on my mother's side was a painter and a calligraphist. I was just exposed to it around him, but like we didn't sit down and paint together, right? Like, so that's the difference between like being craftsy and painterly in a sense. But this like production of creative things, like making things, has been around me when I was little.
Okay.
But he was like,
like a realist.
Yeah, more realist.
Okay.
When he was like, after he passed away from the stuff that he left behind, like we found just like pencil drawings of Ingrid Bergman, like perfectly done. It's hanging in my apartment now.
Wow.
It's like he just had a green pencil in hand, so he just drew it with a green pencil. Like he just painted and drew. Like he did a lot of stuff like that, but it was more of a personal activity for him. Even though I was exposed to it, so that was around me. And in terms of like high school education, I went to a private high school. No, there was an art class once a week, but I always felt like it wasn't enough, I guess.
Why? How so?
I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it was enough for every student to get some sort of exposure to see if they're interested enough. But it wasn't enough for the interested ones to go deeper and flourish in it.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's where it's like it was designed to teach a class of students, right? Like, so me being more interested into it. So like I would do certain things, like I try, but like it wasn't like I felt like it wasn't enough, and there was no art history education whatsoever. So like your exposure, I learned about Picasso, but I also I only learned about Picasso. I didn't learn about anything else. Like it was we only got like a few handful of traditional names thrown around. So when we were doing term papers, like I always chose like art history. The thing that I was going to do in college was like take art history classes because I was so starved for it.
Yes.
And getting into college, I didn't get to go to art school because you needed a private instructor to put together the required portfolios. And at that age, I didn't have the skill set of like to create a portfolio on my own without that instruction. And
is that typical?
What do you mean?
To have a like an art
we don't
portfolio
have SBA in
advisor
Istanbul, so like
you have design schools in Istanbul. You have art schools there.
No, there's like one art school. Well, there's a few art schools, but they're very like college level and they're intellectuals, and like they're not like there is not this idea like SBA. At least when I was at that age, maybe it's now, maybe it's available now. I don't want to speak as if I know, but there wasn't this like course that you could go to prepare you. Also, the type of like portfolio, like they would need to be training you for. I wanted to study in the U.S., so like the portfolio I would need to put together would need to satisfy the U.S. institutions. Didn't have expertise in that, so you needed a private instructor for that.
Wow.
Whereas we couldn't afford it, so I didn't apply to art schools because I didn't have the portfolio. I had classmates who did like 4-week summer intensives at RISD, kind of like the classes that you were taking in the city, to put together a portfolio so they could apply to architecture school, they could apply to creative programs in like more liberal arts colleges or art schools. We couldn't afford that either.
But did you know early on, like in your early high school, that this was a career path that you wanted to get on?
I didn't even know the difference between advertising and branding. I didn't learn that until I did my first internship. Yes. So all I knew was if I wanted to have a creative career, it had to be in advertising. To do in advertising, I had to study creative things. I didn't even have access to art history. I didn't want to be a painter ever. I didn't think that I was going to be like this artist where I'm going to paint things, but just like exploring all of that, I I knew that I needed liberal arts that could education that would give me enough base to pivot around. Yes, which is where I ended up.
When we get back, we'll talk about art school for undergrads. This is Gatsby Fridays.
Let's talk about college. Alex, you went to art school for undergrad. I went to a liberal arts university. What are some of the lifelong benefits you can talk about being at an art school versus maybe a more general institution?
So my path is a little different. I went to art school, got my portfolio together, and started at Pratt, actually for computer graphics and illustration. And that's what I started doing. That's the very first things I started doing. So when I was there, I realized, you know what? I think I want to study fashion. And then I had to reapply for school all over again, applied to Parsons and FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, even though Pratt itself had a fashion program, but it was a very small program. And FIT's program was the biggest fashion program that was affordable for me.
But also, you always say that Parsons almost gets you to a more high-end fashion versus FIT gets you
I wouldn't say
into the workforce.
I wouldn't say just high-end fashion. Parsons is a more art-based school, meaning that I think it gives you the creative room to think. I'm glad for my FIT education. What it did, it does what it says it's going to do. You're going to get an education and you're going to get work. And I can't knock that. That's what it did for me.
But I think it's a good distinction to understand that just because the program is available in a school that you are looking at doesn't mean every program is the same. It really is. It takes a lot of comparison and research to know what the school means, what the program means. It's not all one size fits all.
No, it's not. It's not. It definitely. And even with my own education, it wasn't. It was clearly not one size fits all, because once I got out of college with a degree in fashion and I started my career in the industry, I started realizing fashion wasn't just the only thing that I wanted to know.
So that's a good distinction between the schools. So what are some skill sets, ways of thinking, or practices that you picked up in undergrad from FIT that are still useful to you today? And it's not, college is a full scope of experience. It's not just the classes. So,
So here's one thing.
Lifelong friends count.
Lifelong friends count, definitely. I've met a handful of friends that I still have to this very day. One valuable lesson that I think I really got from my experience is that it doesn't necessarily matter what the outcome of your projects are. The biggest thing is how you speak about your work. And I realized oftentimes that the students that I was in, and I was in the fashion program, and not to talk ill of fashion students, but fashion students keep their designs very close to the chest, and they're not very social, or only social in small groups. But what I've realized is that oftentimes the students that got better reactions to their work were the ones who spoke about it fondly and spoke about their own projects highly, even though there were students who were much more technically proficient in what they were doing in their sewing skills or their stitching skills or putting materials together. But those students' works were put to the wayside to students whose work were a little bit more sloppy but a little bit more edgy. And they were able to speak well on their projects. And that's a lesson that I still carry till this day. You speak highly of something that you've worked on, and you speak intelligently about that process and those things, and hopefully your message comes across. So that was a valuable lesson that I learned.
I didn't go to art school. I went to Tulane University, which is a liberal arts university, and it's a huge school. It has med school, it has law school, it has business school, it also has an architecture school, which was something that, again, I didn't have a portfolio to apply to architecture school, which I'm so glad now I was able to do. It's very rare for architecture programs to do this, but they offered a minor in architecture, so I was able to explore that. I learned so many lessons from that one studio class there that I still know, the how you think about things, but also Tulane is a very social school. I learned what culture shock is coming from Turkey to New Orleans and like thinking that, you know, like you're 18, you think you're the shit, but you're not. And that's the irony of it. Like I didn't fit in, my outfits didn't fit in, I wasn't this fluent. So it made me study a lot more. I also, you know, like I had all this free time because I wasn't partying along with the other kids. So I spent a lot of time in the art department, like just working on my printmaking. I got better. Like I learned the techniques. I spent hours in the dark room because I didn't care about hanging out.
These were all
my undergraduate
your
classes.
Undergraduate classes, even though this was within the liberal arts that you were doing?
Yeah, so Tulane has fine arts. It's got a fine arts program, and you could either get a BA or a BFA. Meaning Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Fine Arts. I did a BA. I didn't want to get... The requirements for BFA was more specific, and I didn't want to choose between printmaking, photography. And I didn't even know, like, when I got to college, all I wanted was, like, give me some art history classes. And those killed me because there was so much memorizing, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But the things that I learned and memorized there still serve me today. The names that I learned, artworks that I wasn't exposed to before, you know, like everybody knows who Picasso is. But I learned about Cindy Sherman. I learned about a lot of like feminist art, for example, that I wouldn't know otherwise. And it didn't blow me away then. It just, that well-rounded individual expectation that you're going to be from college, that's what it did for me. I knew that I needed to learn graphic design, but I didn't know where to start. I just didn't want to keep on just like doing pencil drawings. I wanted to learn how to make certain things. I wanted to learn the programs. I wanted to learn how to design logos. That's not available at Tulane. So like I had to figure out my path to it. And I remember I went into the college advisor's office, Carol Pizer, this skinny, frizzy white hair lady, just bare feet always in her office. And I was like, so upset. And I'm like, well, you know, it's like I'm not getting where I want to. Like, there's graphic design, like, but it's like in a different campus, and it doesn't give me any credits for my graduation because it's like offered to like as a hobby class for continuing education for locals. It's not for the undergrad prospects. Okay. And she was like, well, have you considered printmaking? And I was like, what is that? I didn't even know what it was. And she pointed something on her wall and said, my daughter printed that. Take the printmaking class. And that has changed my life. And I was always interested in photography, so I took black and white photography too. Actually, like those two areas that I took further and learned more, I just didn't want to pick between the two. I didn't want to be FA and to choose one of them and take it further. I just wanted to be proficient in both, which still pays very well for my career right now to understand photography to that level. But also learning, like, those teachers. I was so aware that I needed to learn. I was ready to listen. So the lessons that I learned, things that I remember being, like, not earning the grade that I wanted to because my composition was missing. I remember I made this, like, really tedious printmaking plate to make shells. And the shells individually were beautiful, but they didn't have the right composition. It looked like a bunch of shells. And she was like, this looks like bathroom wallpaper. And I was like, but they're so pretty and I spent hours on them. And the teacher was like, well, you know, yeah. But do you think I will?
School.
But you know what? That's like, it was perfect. Like that lesson, it wasn't hurtful. It wasn't like to call me out. Like I needed to learn that lesson. I did.
That's what you go to school
and
for.
Like, exactly. So all of these things, yes, they taught me everything about creative art, seeing it a different way. So I was a little late in that game, but also because I was curious about a lot of things and I thought that I needed to do advertising for a creative career. I didn't understand what branding was. I didn't even know it existed until I got my first internship. I also did a communications major because I was interested in films, and this is also, remember, end of the 90s where it's like still highlight, like, you know, the high of like going to the movies was still a hot thing. And I'm always interested in pop culture, and I didn't have enough background. I didn't grow up here, so I was missing a lot of references. I took a lot of classes, like communication theory classes, to catch up on those. And so I have a double major in communication and fine arts. Neither of them get you a job designing logos when you graduate.
They supply a backbone to an idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I got my first job, I was frustrated because I was like not allowed to design the logos. I just wanted them to let me play with it, and they're like, no, we need you to do this other thing. But I got that job because of this, I had the foundations, right?
Exactly.
And like I remember like my internship interview, I had a bunch of slides of my, like, printmaking work, which is very painterly. Like, it was... And then it's like, I remember walking into that studio, taking the elevator up, old school elevator, opens up to the entire loft. There's a meeting on the right-hand side, and I'm walking in so uncomfortably with my, like, ill-fitting, like, interview suit in college, all the way to the back of that loft to meet with the owner. So, like, I had what it took, because I explored all these things that, even though I didn't think it was what I wanted.
It goes to show you that even though maybe your portfolio didn't mirror what the studio work was doing, I mean, someone had the foreknowledge to say, this is interesting work, and you are also a person not only thinks creatively, but thinks and goes deeper into that thought. You see what I'm saying? Like,
you're an artist.
You have to dive into a deeper frame of reference in order to open up whatever ideas that you're trying to open up. So even though this was a branding studio and you wanted to design logos, you still needed a reference point.
Of course. And, like, you learn. You're not expected to know everything when you show up for an internship interview. You're expected to show potential to learn. That's I think, key. But definitely, like, college... Well, I learned how to acclimate to the U.S. culture, but also because that whole culture shock thing, I actually studied a lot harder in college than I did when I was in high school, because I had all this free time on my hands, and I was like, well, printmaking's fun. Let's just keep hanging out in the studio and print more things,
Did you get to meet other people in printmaking studio?
I did, but I wasn't this fluent, and I'm also, it's harder to make friends when you can't just keep chatting casually with people in college at that age. Later in life, people are more patient. I'm also not fluent now, clearly. Our entire show is us talking. But people later in life are more patient listening to you.
Yes.
But if you're trying to just click with a bunch of kids in college, if you're dragging too long, it does get in the way.
The attention span.
The unfortunate reality of it is real. Culture shock is real, and you do have to go past it. You have to go past your language limitations to connect. So I had a lot, like, I didn't make as many friends as in college, so I studied more, but I also created more. I did so many different things. So college also gave me, like, the facilities to do all of this.
That's a good point to bring up. You have the resources for experimentation in college.
I mean, I did visit RISD. And I saw the facilities they had. They had an entire building dedicated to printmaking with a press on every floor. And I was like, well, we have this one that we take rounds on, but, like, still.
That's okay. I mean, like, otherwise, you wouldn't have a printing press in your home. So
trust me, if I have the space, I would put one in.
If you have the space, but that's also a good positive.
Oh yeah,
obviously, giving you the resources and the space to truly experiment, and that's what I do appreciate. I mean, we had a lab that was just called the sewing lab. You sign up for your time, but you could do pretty much whatever you want, and all the machines were available to you. The Merrill machine, the double needle stitch machine, the juke machines.
Yeah, like, you're not expected to buy them. Like, I think that's, like, the difference once you no longer have access to school. Any hobby that you want to develop comes out of your own pocket. I mean, still, art school's still expensive.
Art school, yes. It's still expensive, but it's even more expensive.
Paper was so expensive, I remember that.
To own your own equipment.
Yes, it's more expensive to own the actual equipment itself. So there's like the whole question of, like, if you're an artist, do you need to go to college? I do think that if you want to be a professional, you do need a college experience, and I do believe that college makes you a more well-rounded individual, because I didn't just study art there. I mean, of course, I had a lot of learning to do in that department, but also I learned ways of thinking, I learned collaboration, I learned, like, critiquing other people's work, and the critiquing experience, that's a lifetime of experience. Like, that, you need a lot of experience understanding how people react, reading other people's work, how to say things kindly and constructively, there's a lot of ways about it. So I would say, like, I think that college gives you a full rounded experience. I think it's important. Would I work with people from no college degrees? Of course. If you have the work to back up, I don't need to see your college diploma, But for me, I thrived in that environment, and I needed that environment. I personally think highly of a well-rounded education is important.
I get you. I was just thinking that I've known graffiti artists all my life, and these are truly legit artists who don't have traditional art backgrounds but are amazing talents. And these are people that I'm just remembering in my background that I would hire in a second if given the opportunity. And they just didn't come. They just didn't come to their profession the same way that traditionally that we would go through art schools.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you went to an art school. I didn't, but at the end, like there was a college level accredited institution education that I benefited greatly from.
As well as I.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add as well that the difference between the schools that we went to, I just know that we also had our foundation years, which is what you would consider the liberal art years. And then after that 2 years, I don't know if it's the same now, for me, that next 2 years, you had to pick a specialization, whether you wanted to go into, and what it means by specialization within the fashion frame, activewear, sportswear, so on and so forth. What you would do is you would pick that and you would travel 2 years from the same classes to same classes. So you would see the same people and you would not interact with people.
What do you mean interact?
You wouldn't interact with people from other majors because you were so steeped into your own grouping. So I was lucky because my work study job in college was actually working at the computer lab.
Oh yeah, I did that too.
And working at the computer lab exposed me to a lot more other people.
Same.
In other majors, graphic designers, illustrators, animators, communications students.
But again, you're still in a specialized school, right?
It's still focused.
You're surrounded by already creative people that are getting more into niches.
Yes.
For me, the structure wasn't as strict. For us, you had the first 2 years to declare your major. You could have declared it day one or not. It's up to you. If you wanted to explore, you had that opportunity. So I declared communications, but it took me longer to declare fine arts, bachelor in fine arts. So I have a double major and a minor. So I did that architecture minor also because I was like, well, if this is available to me, I don't want to just take a bunch of classes. I want to actually, did that minor do ever anything for me? No, not really, other than actually me having learned things through the classes. The certification is meaningless, but it's a huge school. And the business majors can take an art class. The science kids could take a communications class because you do need to check off some social science basics, a broader I struggled mostly with science and biology and stuff like that. There were these a few handful of classes that you would hear from other people be like, this is not that scientific, this is more like conceptual, and I was like, thank you, please. You had to do one lab class no matter what. I almost failed that. I almost lost my scholarship over it, but I did it. So from that perspective, did I have to suffer through it? I don't know. You had to check those marks off, but also you were able to experience other industries. Your requirements, if you play around and cover your bases in the first 2 years and never declare a major until you absolutely have to, that's of course, and you would have to specialize the last 2 years. But I was already taking art classes from day one, so I was already spread out throughout the 4 years.
This happened a little bit after I graduated college. I took a trip to London. So I wanted to figure out where to go in life, and I was in fashion, and I was able to get my first job, and I decided maybe I want to go back to school to do a continuing education thing or think about grad school. And I thought the first school I would want to go to is Central St. Martin's in London. And so I was there with a good friend. We decided to just take a tour of the school. We were there, and they were very accommodating. And it totally blew my mind that when you're specializing in your major, whatever you're doing, a filmmaker, photography, fashion student, I wanted to get into the fashion program, that your thesis projects, it blew my mind the fact that your major doesn't have to coincide with what your final thesis projects are. If you're a fashion student, your thesis project could be a series of paintings. If you're a photography student, your thesis project could be a film that you've made. And this opened my mind to the fact that once you get out into the world, you're going to be dealing with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
So once I got back, I wound up not enrolling, but once I got back to the United States, I started going to school like it was my life's work, to start learning every single thing I could possibly want to learn about everything.
You mean this is like post
Post
FIT?
college.
Yes, post college.
Post college.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my dream after I did my internship here that summer was to work in the city at a job like that one and take classes at night at one of the art schools that I didn't get to go to for undergrad. And I did do that. And I was very lucky at the branding agency. I was basically trained by the creative director, and it was also a very benevolent environment where the senior designers were really like showing me the ways. Like this one, there's two people that come to mind. You had left by then. There's Michelle, that she became my friend, even though despite the age difference, and she patiently showed me how she does things, and like very like, her mild-mannered character. At the same time, there was Eric Z. He showed me how to do everything, basically, how to use Illustrator, how to do the watercolors. Like, I had to do these illustrations for a brand, and I was doing it differently, and he was like, just let it loose. Like, he gave me techniques of watercolor, and then when I needed to do something in Illustrator, he'd be like, this is how you do it. So when I started working, I was like, Eric, I'm going to take classes. What classes should I take? And I was like, well, I should probably take an Illustrator class, right? He's like, you already know how to use Illustrator. Don't take Illustrator. Take something you don't know how to do. So he made me take Flash classes. Back then, Flash was the thing.
Oh, yeah.
In 2000.
I remember.
In 2002, Barney's website had already been developed, and it was like the hit where like
things were
screens
moving yes.
things around like on a website that had never been seen before, and it was mind-blowing. So I actually registered for a class by the guy who designed and built the Barney's website. And that's the thing that you're saying about, like, taking these art classes in the city from these accredited schools. You get to actually work with these leaders of the industry and big names. So I started taking Flash classes. I kept learning on the job, but also I took typography classes because I was like, well, you know what, like, I know enough, but I think I need like the foundations of like how to design with type, because no one taught me that. Like in fine arts programs, they don't teach you that. They teach you composition and technique, theme behind your work. They don't really teach you how to incorporate typography. That's for the graphic designers, right?
And that's the thing, you go once you get out there, you meet a whole host of people with a whole host of separate tools that they come to their work experience with. You realize, it's important to know not only them, but also know their techniques on what they do, because it's a holistic approach when you're approaching projects. I remembered once I started on my path, fashion wasn't just the clothing. Fashion was the whole world connected to the clothing. It was the graphic design of the brochures that you were going to be using for the lookbooks. It was the photography that was going to be going into the lookbooks. It was knowing how to create a lookbook physically, and I needed to learn all these different things. And I just started taking classes in everything, in photography, in filmmaking, in writing, in everything that I thought would enable me to be well-rounded. And this supplemented the rest of my education.
Yeah, I mean, for continuing education, and it's you and I both coming from different backgrounds, we still did things. Like I finished college, it wasn't time to go just work. I was like, there's more for me to learn. There's more things for me to accomplish. Yes. And it wasn't this like ambitious approach. It's more of a, well, I don't know how to do that. Let's go learn.
Yes.
And I think that if I had time, I would keep. I mean, we're still learning, right?
We're still learning.
We had to learn how to sound edit to get this podcast out to both of us. At a certain level in your life, you're accustomed to certain software. It's not rocket science. We're not sound engineers, but we know, we know how to edit a few pieces of sound thing to like put together this podcast. But I think that foundation of being able to just take what comes at you comes from two things. One, the willingness to learn new tools, not be intimidated by the fact that you and I are not sound engineers. Also, this thing that, well, it needs to get done. Well, let's go figure out how to do it.
That's the truth. I mean, there's just no way around it. Like, if you want to get things done, you gotta learn what those processes are, and you gotta put those into work. This podcast is a perfect example of that. But this is but one example.
Yeah. I mean, there's also different, like, we ended up taking these extra classes at accredited universities in the city, but now there's this whole slew of schools out there. Flatiron School, General Assembly.
The list goes on.
I mean, there's so many of them. And we've been to, like, I mean, I've taken classes at General Assembly. They don't teach you everything, but, like, they give you enough basics to be able to, like, if you are determined, you can go figure out the rest yourself. And I did learn. I understood what that was about and what my role needed to be in it when it comes to client projects and what I need to do to promote my own studio. But at the same time, now that I'm on the hiring end of the table, I'm seeing over the past 5 years an influx of types of portfolios that are coming from these schools for when I look for designers. It says, I want to see layout and typography skills in your portfolio. Do not apply without a portfolio. And these schools are cranking out these. There's a need for technology talent, for project managers, for UX designers, for developers in the tech industry.
And that's why they exist.
That's why these schools came about, because not everybody had the time and bandwidth to go and, like, you know, learn these specialized skills, especially if you're trying to, like, switch a career to find work in this tech space. But I find that design portfolios that I receive, mostly from General Assembly, are a bunch of photos of whiteboards with boxes of, like, workflow charts. The degree is not called UI design, but also I have seen an influx of participation, like a few early on to, like, last year when last time I advertised for a design position, to like 50 applicants with the same looking thing, and none of them are designers. Designers in the sense that without the requirements that I list in terms of typography skills, layout skills, I want to see visual aesthetics. And
I think that's what you're kind of getting at. What is lost is a design language, an actual design aesthetical language that is pleasant and concise. And you lose that. I wouldn't say
lost. UX design is user experience design.
Yeah.
It's analytical design. They're not trying to make things pretty there. They're trying to make sense of systems. So when you're interacting with an app, the system feels intuitive to you. They're not there learning how to design what that interface looks like, which is UI design. I just find that they either don't teach the UX candidates how to distinguish themselves and not to apply to these positions, where it's like, I'm not asking for a UX person. I'm asking for a graphic designer, and you clearly are not, like, typography, layout, and this and that. It's just literally flooded the entire application process. Like, I'm always in the market for learning more and taking more classes. And I find I'm a nerd at heart, so I will always want to take classes and learn new things, different things, grow. But at the same time, I would be very mindful of and research really well exactly what you're getting out of these programs. Make sure that what you're looking for matches what they are promising you.
There's a need. That's why these schools exist.
I mean, I needed them.
Yes.
So, like, this is not
what
something...
is lost with the churn of these candidates coming out is we lose in a way creative thinking. You know, like UX and UI design, two separate things. Like you said, are these black and white flow charts of how systems work and how best for the user to click on what's the best way to get the least amount of clicks to get to the desired point in the website that you want to be in. And yes, there is a direct point to that. There's also an artistic approach to that is lost.
You and I both benefited from this art education in different roundabout ways to a way of thinking, a way of executing. I think that's the key, because that sets you up for life. It's not, you know, right now you learn how to use Illustrator. Well, I learned how to use Flash. It's useless now, but that back then was a hot thing to know. It was simple enough of a coding language, and I have no computer programming background, but I was able to now, because of those classes that I took, look at code and understand basics of it. I cannot understand whatsoever what it's saying, but I at least know what I'm looking at. I'm not completely foreign to it. That work that I did there in those classes is what got me into grad school. It showed initiative that I was interested in exploring something beyond a logo, something beyond a moving image. What else can we do? And the next step was interaction, especially at that time in the industry.
Hello and welcome back to GATSBY Fridays. Sarah, we talked about formal degrees and certifications. But what about fun? What do you do, or what classes have you taken just for you?
Just for me, I've taken some watercolor classes that have been excellent and mind-blowingly boring at the same time.
Explain.
So I live a block away from New York students. The
Art Student
League of New York. A lot of famous artists and designers have come through there. But the difference between, unless you're doing this like full on different, like taking classes, if you just want to take the classes for hobby and have the space to create, it was a great place. There were people taking the classes for 5 years, for 13 years, and there's a figure drawing kind of type of thing. Like there's a person that comes in that models, and you're there with your watercolor pad, and there's very few instructions. I was told to use a really large brush and like basic colors and like shown a few techniques, and that's what I was supposed to work on day in and day out, week after week. And that's where I got a little bored, because at the level that I was at, maybe if I was younger and I was trying to learn things for the first time ever, I already had played enough with watercolor. I just wanted to learn more techniques. And I was like, well, why does the yellow paint dissolve differently than the blue paint in water? And he was like, what are you talking about? It's like 3.5 hours of sitting there. And for someone who needs an outlet, it's an excellent place. And at the same time, if you're trying to learn a technique for the first time, like I've done a printmaking class there with a friend of mine, with Fritz, and it was great. We did the copper etching. They showed us everything, but those were like the weekend classes. There's a Lower East Side paint studio called Dirty Hands, and this artist is running it. It's his project, and he called himself, he's like, I want to be the Soul Cycle of art studios. Everything is ready for you. You do not bring any supplies. It's an hour, and there are series, or you can take one-offs. So I took the watercolor series for a month. Every class I learned a different technique. I learned the intricacies of that technique. I learned materials, and for an hour, once a week, I needed to learn techniques. He teaches other types of classes, also like this paint class where it's like with tape you paint, you tape up a bunch of shapes and then you paint like opaque paint and like create shapes with it. Like he has a handful of classes. I hope he's still around after COVID, since in-person classes are a little tricky now.
Yes.
But I thought that was a very inspired place. Beautifully designed, very Lower East Side, and he's a real painter in life teaching you these things. But I appreciated that more. So that was so much fun for me. Like I was so inspired, so excited. I took that to a different level of like started paint. I was also around that time getting interested in hand lettering. So I combined the two and did this whole project of hand lettered affirmation cards. Because I started writing my own affirmations, and I was like, well, I should make these pretty. But I learned techniques that I'm like, I will never stop using. And it wasn't about composition anymore, because that's not what I need. And the way that he designed the classes, whether you're like me, who doesn't need that, or whether someone off the street who has no art interest, they just wanted to explore something different, we were sitting at the same table following the same instruction, and neither of us got bored or felt intimidated. Like he figured out how to package that into an hour so well. Real artists in the industry that are really good at what they do, that already are names on their own, those were fun. I didn't do any of those like specifically to target a career goal. I was just interested in learning and playing around with paint and paper. What about you?
Well, so like I said earlier, I once I got back from London, I wanted to just study all aspects of art that I could, and that led into, once again, all the filmmaking, photography, even a little bit of screen printing myself.
You had a gallery show in the West Village the summer I met you, my internship summer.
And those things.
The year after that, you were making films, and that's how we got into our movie nights once a week.
Oh, those were the days. Movies. Are we ever going to go back to movie theaters?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think that's done for life, but
oh man,
that's a whole episode on
that's
its own.
I know. I digress. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But so since quarantine, there's been a proliferation of online classes. Obviously, my kids are going to online schools, and a lot of people that I know are doing the same. I just kind of started looking at videos. These are classes and just learning a new thing that doesn't necessarily have to coincide with what your career is. These are just things that I wanted to do for fun, like learning how to braid paracord. I'd like to take more classes. I haven't found anything at the moment that piques my interest, but I'm sure I would like to take. You know what? No, I take that back. I would love to take a film making class again. I want to learn how to make films in like the Italian New Wave style.
Yeah, I mean there are
I
classes
would
out there.
love to do that, but I want that specific aesthetic, and I want to learn how to make like, those
Yeah,
types of films.
you're not trying to learn how to operate a camera. You're trying to learn how to create a story within its.
To create a mood, an aesthetic, and I just want to have characters in tiny suits, in tiny sports cars, going around the countryside. I just want to film that. That's what I.
But there is like a lot of online things that you can find. When I got interested in hand lettering, there's so much video content out there.
I was actually going to ask you, what do you feel about just going at it on your own and just researching just videos and just kind of learning from those videos?
I mean, I have benefited from it, but it's still challenging and it's hard to connect for me at least. Like I need that forced environment to be physically in to focus. Maybe it's
sitting in a class.
Yeah.
Okay.
And being in front of someone.
Okay.
As much as like I like the convenience of doing it from my apartment. So when I got into hand lettering, like there are two types of information you can find. You can either find the specific artist that you're interested in, and they put out a lot of video content and tutorials, sometimes paid, sometimes free. And I've learned a lot from those types of things. And there's also platforms like Skillshare. There's ways to grow, even though we're quarantined and there's no like in-person classes. Yes, it will not bring a printmaking studio into your apartment, your shoebox, New York.
But you could
New
start
City
preparing those ideas. So when you're ready to go into that print
I
run.
mean, I feel like yes, I didn't get the same full immersive experience, but I've learned a bunch of skills that I can like base on. It's a way to get started. And if you're curious, there's enough free information out there from the comfort of your couch to go explore, I think.
Now let's move on to our favorite part of this and every episode, our signature cocktail. Sarah, we talked about this drink, and we were trying to figure out how best to approach this topic in drink form.
Yeah,
What do we have?
This one was all challenging. We've been talking about a cocktail that would reflect the spirit. Running theme of this episode is don't stop looking for opportunities to learn. So I wanted to kind of bring that whole lifelong experience of learning into a lifelong experience of drinking. What have you been drinking that for that long in your whole life, your whole adult life? What's that one drink? And that one drink is tequila.
Good old tequila.
Well, because it doesn't change form in the sense it just like the same way that your learning experience grows.
But it
and
travels.
I know this is a reach, but
it travels.
You start with the fundamentals, and then you're learning more like either abstract inspirational forms, or like you're taking your learning experience to the more diverse approach. So when you start with tequila in college, you're going with the bottom of the line shelf, like bottom shelf tequila. You lick the salt of your hand, and then you do a shot of tequila, and then you follow that with a lime slice. And over the years, you kind of grow out of that into drinking, first of all, better quality tequila, because bad tequila is, bad alcohol.
Fond memories.
It's like I'm sure we've all had some bad memories with that one. So the way that tequila is present in my life has been to do the college style, salt lemon shot, to now drinking better tequila like Casa Azul, and sipping it instead of doing like a shot. And this is a Mexican tradition to chase it with, to sip alongside. I wouldn't call it exactly a chaser. It's to sip alongside the tequila. There's it's called a Sangrita. It's a tomato-based mixed drink with spices and stuff. So to kind of cut the alcohol taste of it, but because you're drinking better quality tequila, it's actually pleasurable to sip it. The flavors have complexity, and they're accentuated by this tomato sipper on the side, and that's called the Sangrita. So I'm going with just pure tequila for this one, and I'm gonna call it Shine On because you're doing it your whole life, and you're only getting better and better at it.
You're reinforcing that message of learning and growing.
I know it's a reach, but this one I feel like it's in the right line of thinking. So yes, the Shine On is the episode. Like Shine On is just sipping tequila, but in a bigger concept of you start with shots of tequila into growing up and sipping tequila. It's not like one recipe. It's a lifelong experience of tequila.
Don't be sipping this tequila while you're working with heavy machinery or print presses.
Yes.
Thank you for hanging with us. For a list of resources mentioned in this week's episode, hop onto our site, GATSBYFridays.com.
You can find the recipe for Shine On our site, GATSBYFridays.com.
For show notes, or if you want to leave a comment or suggest show topics, get at us on our site.
Don't forget to rate us, give us 5 stars, and write a review on Apple. It really helps to get in front of more ears and build our audience. Or if you're a Spotify person, please follow Gatsby Fridays.
Or on Instagram, follow us at Gatsby Fridays.
Stay with us. On our next episode, we will have our own love letter to New York City.
This is Gatsby Fridays.